This is Wall Street Week. I'm David Westin, bringing you stories of capitalism. President Trump managed to get a slew of tariffs in place, either unilaterally or by agreement, before his August 1 deadline. But at least so far, we haven't seen them do much to the economy. We explore what CEOs of major companies are doing to make sure their business stays on track despite the tariffs. And we get a somewhat different perspective from the head of a modest-sized textile company in Colorado that counts heavily on imports and exports. Plus, not everyone is welcoming all those data centers with open arms. We travel to Warrenton, Virginia, a town where some are concerned about what they will mean for their community. But we start with another uncomfortable truth linked to AI, the possibility that this time it really is different. Different in what technological change is doing to recent college graduates trying to start their careers. There is no question that AI is here to stay. Just last month, we reported that Anthropic, a company that didn't exist 6 years ago, could be worth more than Nike or Starbucks.
Anthropic, 170 billion, XAI in talks for 200 billion, and I think there's nowhere to go but up.
And there's no question that at least some employees stand to make a great deal of money for their ride on the AI train.
Apple's top executive in charge of AI models is leaving for Meta Platforms.
I'm told his pay package is probably somewhere north of $200 million.
We have never seen anything like this before, and there's a lot we don't know about what it will do for business and the economy. But we do know that leaders of the world's largest and most powerful firms expect a tidal wave. They are preparing for it. And already, some people are feeling the effects on the ground right now. People not at the very top of the corporate ladder, but those trying to get a step on the bottom rung. This year, Jacob Ayub and Tiffany Lee are joining millions of their fellow college graduates trying to get their careers started.
This is just one of the case studies that I've done, but it's pretty representative of what you can expect if you're applying for any full-time role at a private equity company. Luckily, Boston College does a really good job of setting that financial background. We've done in-class DCFs, in-class LBOs.
Here's your iced matcha skim milk.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. I have a few case studies on my portfolio just showcasing the work that I've done at school for the companies and nonprofits that I've worked for. The last experience I have is another contract role with a startup that I did through a club at Cornell as well.
They have studied different subjects at different schools. Tiffany, information science and psychology at Cornell, Jacob, economics and finance at Boston College. But the two graduates have a lot in common. They both got good grades, networked widely, and landed prestigious internships. Tiffany at Apple and Jacob at a boutique private equity firm. And for both, it has yet to add up to a job.
Since graduating college, I would say I've applied to around 200 jobs.
I would say I've applied to about 150, maybe more now.
Some of the interview processes consist of constructing models and valuations. Some of them are pitch decks.
I made it to the final round for one big tech company. Didn't end up getting it. I'm past round 2 for another one, and the other ones either haven't heard back or just ghosted. Yeah.
It's a story that's becoming more common, and it's being reflected in an unusual new trend in the economic data. As far back as the numbers go, the unemployment rate for recent college graduates has been below the rate for all U.S. workers. But over the past few years, unemployment among recent grads climbed above the rate for the broader population.
This is essentially the first time on an ongoing basis that this has occurred in the 45 plus years that we have data going back to.
Matthew Martin is a senior economist at Oxford Economics.
So really this is pointing towards a lot of people who have that higher educational attainment are actually worse off than many of their peers who have lower educational attainment. That's an interesting dynamic to have in a market where you're told you go to college, you work hard, you'll have a job after graduation. And unfortunately for many at the moment, that's just not happening.
Recent college grads may be having a harder time right now finding their first job, but it depends in part on what kind of job they're seeking. Entry-level jobs in the areas Tiffany and Jacob want, tech and finance respectively, turn out to be particularly hard to find.
A lot of my peers who were in years advanced from me and trying to give me insights on how the process worked. All either had internships or were in the process of getting them or had full-time offers. And these are sometimes people that are just juniors who have a full-time offer at a bank or a different firm. And I think with my graduation class, there's been a pretty drastic change. I'd say about 50% of my graduating class is unemployed.
I see a lot of job descriptions that are asking for like 2 years of experience or like 3 years of experience. And in design specifically, it's been pretty hard. I think it's just a very saturated field and there's a lot of talent out there.
Tech is one of those that has been really slowed down. A lot of that comes down to the hiring boom that they did post-pandemic and them looking to right size. You also have other mathematical occupations in finance, legal, some of these fields that you would, again, have been in high demand over the last couple of years that just aren't seeing as much.
Economists say the reasons can be difficult to trace. Some of it is likely the overall labor market cooling after the post-pandemic hiring surge. But now there's a new cause coming on the scene: artificial intelligence.
AI will leave a lot of white-collar people behind.
All junior-level jobs in any industry are at high risk.
This is like a tsunami hitting the labor market.
For months, economists and executives have been raising concerns about AI or publicly embracing it, sometimes both. Amazon CEO Andy Jassy wrote a note to employees in June saying that AI would change the way work is done at the tech giant and that jobs would be cut as AI increased efficiency. Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei told one news outlet that AI could potentially wipe out half of all entry-level white-collar jobs and send unemployment rates surging. We may not be seeing anything quite that bad yet, but AI's impact does seem to be showing up in unemployment figures for recent college graduates.
I think there is definitely a link between the two. It's hard to very parse through and just say, X amount of this issue is because of AI, X amount is because of just slower demand overall. But when we look at the numbers, there definitely could be a connection there. So one of the things we're seeing is that the tech sector is one of the industries with the highest adoption rates of AI. They have around 25% adoption rates for all businesses using it in their day-to-day operations, whereas the national average is around 5%. So clearly the sector is just using it more in general. And then when we look into specifically the recent college graduate data, we see that in the last couple years, employment for recent college grads, 22 to 27, they've seen a decrease in employment opportunities overall. Whereas if you look in the same fields for those 28 and onwards, they've actually seen, slightly flat to maybe a little bit up overall.
A similar story appears in the latest company hiring data. An analysis by Indeed, conducted for Wall Street Week, shows junior-level job postings have tumbled over the last 2 years and are now 21% below their pre-pandemic level, even as senior-level openings are up. Although tech may be one area where AI is particularly affecting entry-level positions, it's not the only one. As Martin says, they see vulnerability in finance jobs like the one that Jacob is seeking. To learn more, we sat down with Blair Efron, co-founder of Centerview Partners, one of the world's most prestigious investment banks. We see an awful lot of money being invested in AI. Are we far enough into the process now to know whether it's going to work? Now, obviously, there are different ways it could work, high, medium, low, but do we know it's fundamentally going to work, that there's no chance this is a bubble?
So it's not a bubble. I am always a believer in progress. AI is progress. Over the long haul, it'll be good. In the short term, I have big concerns. I believe the impact on employment is going to be dramatic, sooner than we think. Now, with that said, AI, for us as an example, is a positive. We're less focused on productivity, more focused on freeing up someone's time so that they can use that time more productively. But given all the positives, we have to absolutely look out for the watch out sign. What is going to go on with employment?
One outcome could be a workforce that looks very different than it does today. Fewer jobs in computer science, finance, or law, and more jobs that benefit from interpersonal interaction. Matthew Martin says these trends are already showing up in the data, whether or not they can be traced to AI, and they are affecting men and women differently.
While the recent college graduate unemployment has raised overall, it's really been concentrated in males specifically. A lot of that comes down to, what industries are they looking to work in. If we do a quick breakout of the industries of recent college graduates, females tend to move towards healthcare services and educational services where demand's quite high. I think between those two, they account for over 40% of recent college graduates for females, whereas males specifically in healthcare services only accounts for around 5%. So it's an imbalance of what positions are these males versus females going into. Males tend to skew towards these computer science professions, whether that's programming or the tech sector just in general. That's closer to 20 to 25% for them. So you just have this imbalance of males tending to want to go to these industries where demand is really low at the moment, whereas females are entering industries where demand remains quite high.
Although a picture of AI's economic impact may be just starting to come into focus, we can be sure that the best and the worst are yet to come. Some advice from the C-suite to help the next generation prepare: stay flexible and develop the skills that remain, so far, uniquely human.
Broad-based thinking, deep thinking, and there are just so many different fields and so many different kinds of enterprises, big and small, that will help you do that. Widen the aperture of what you think might be a fit. Taking a lot of writing courses, a lot of humanities, learning how to think critically, learning the art of learning, curiosity, thinking about judgment, thinking about coming out with an output, an answer based on facts that is contrary to what a model may show you. This is what we need, because this is what I think will never get out of style. Judgment's not going out of style.
The benefits of AI in the long run may well dwarf the problems. But when you're in the middle of that first job search, the long run may seem very far off.
You put in a lot of work starting from high school. Get the right SAT score, go to the right college, get internships, get experience. You come out with kind of an uncertainty.
It kind of makes me want to consider a master's, but I know that it's really expensive, and I just don't know if it's worth all that money just to get an entry-level job.
It's more so frustration towards the system and the overall process, but you also start questioning your underlying abilities.
Jacob and Tiffany, it seems, did everything right. And it's not quite that they're falling behind, but that the entire world is shifting under their feet. The rules have suddenly changed. And what are those new rules? For all of us, that still remains to be seen. Coming up, we hear more from Blair Efron, this time not on what AI means for corporate leaders, but on what those leaders are doing to make sure the Trump tariffs don't disrupt their businesses. This is a story about adapting. Charles Darwin taught us that it is not the smartest or strongest that survive, but those who are best able to adapt to the changing environment. And when it comes to CEOs of major companies, there's no question that President Trump's approach has changed their environment. Blair Efron, co-founder of Centerview Partners, has watched them adapt. President Trump came to office saying, I'm going to change the economy in fundamental ways. Has it changed the lives of American CEOs?
Much less than you think. And the fact of the matter is, they were growing well under Biden. They're growing well now. What is that about? For the most part, the U.S. economy, in my world, the big company CEOs, big company senior executives, they've learned to, one, operate quite apart from policy in Washington, and two, they have been operating in a period of volatility for so many years now, they've just gotten much better about how to remove uncertainty in their own businesses. However, CEOs certainly talk about long-term impacts of policy, and what I hear about most more than anything is our federal debt situation, which is clearly dramatic and clearly something that at some point will create a problem.
CEOs may have the tools to adapt to short-term changes in trade policy, but they may not have the same ability to do anything about the U.S. fiscal imbalance over the long term.
2010, Simpson-Bowles put together, talk about the debt. We had $16 trillion of debt then. We're heading towards 40, 3 times what we had then. $1 trillion of interest expense being spent by the government. That's almost 20% of what they do, more than they do on defense. that is something that CEOs are attuned to. They know that if it wasn't this crowding out effect, you could have even more growth. They would benefit.
President Trump's goal in imposing substantial tariffs on imports is to move manufacturing back onshore. And so far, Efron sees them as having mixed results.
It goes two ways. I think you have to start with what is the most secure way to help your supply chain. And that certainly can be onshore. It certainly can be to more friendly markets in Southeast Asia. It can certainly be to Mexico. It's been going both ways. I know of a company that services Canada with its plants in Michigan. It's thinking about putting capital in Canada because of what's going on so they can produce locally. So it actually goes both ways. And the kind of manufacturing we're talking about, for the most part, is very advanced manufacturing. So it's not labor intensive. It's not people in a plant. It's the equipment. So I think that on balance, it's hard to talk to any CEO who thinks that tariffs are a good thing and that high tariffs won't have a dramatic negative impact.
There's a good deal of talk about uncertainty and the uncertainty over everything from tariffs to who's going to be the Fed chair to interest rates. Now, does that really affect the real economy?
The answer is clearly not. Okay? And CEOs have gotten so good about blocking all noise from all political quarters. They focus on facts, substance, real policy. They know that something said today by any elected official doesn't mean much unless there's consisting to it and staying with it, and they just block out the noise. That CEOs, for the most part, are really experienced, really talented, and have been through the volatility wars. But the reason I have been, and we've talked about it, more optimistic about the economy is because of that. And I believe, I can make a case for dark clouds well down the road, but barring some unforced error, which certainly we are prone to make, I think the economy will continue to show tailwind and resilience.
That tailwind may look a bit different in New York City, where New York State Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani is in a strong position to become its next mayor and is running on policies not generally seen as pro-business.
So let's first talk about New York. $1 trillion economy, 63 million visitors, 10% of every student graduating college comes to the city. New York will be fine. That said, the mayor, whoever that person is, needs to be mayor for 8.5 million people in every borough. It has to be a mayor who appreciates what it means to attract business formation, what attracts capital formation, what it means to keep people in the city and thriving. For example, Zohran Mamdani, he's going to have to make the choice whether he wants to be mayor or whether he wants to be an effective mayor. And I believe to be an effective mayor, a talented political official, and he's talented, will have to be attuned to that. A lot of us met with him in the business community the other day, and clearly, one, it was a worthwhile meeting. He listened, courageous for him to come to this group. The questions were pointed. And my goal is that the more he hears from the business community and how the business community helps drive the engine of New York, along with many other communities here, the more if he is the mayor, will appreciate that he needs to be the mayor for everyone.
Having heard from him directly, do you have a sense that he knows what he doesn't know? Because that may be one of the most important things in life, to really say, there are things I don't know I need to learn.
I would say I don't know. However, I'm going to make a judgment. He has said publicly in forums where I've been, just that he wants to get the best people in every position, people who know more about that particular area than he does. He strikes me as someone who is absolutely willing to learn. And I don't think you can do as well as he's done as a candidate without that ability. Whoever the mayor is, I hope really appreciates that the skill set of a mayor, as opposed to somebody in Congress, is less about policy and more about making sure day to day the city is affordable and livable.
It's hard to be against it being affordable and livable. But as far as I can tell, an essential part of governance is unintended consequences. For example, we can say we're going to freeze rents, which sounds good for people who are renting, but it doesn't necessarily give incentive for building a lot more units. Will bring prices down. Is he learning? Can he learn those sort of unintended consequences? That, in fact, the best way to make things more affordable may not be the most obvious way.
So let me be very clear. I don't know yet, nor does anyone, what he's learning. But make no mistake, rent control will reduce housing stock. Putting a grocery store in each borough, that's 5, relative to the 2,500 grocery stores we have in the 5 boroughs, doesn't do much. Let's be clear. Anyone here is already paying a lot of tax. It's a privilege to live in New York. There is a point where, and we see it in studies, it has an impact if it gets out of line with other states. So the point is, we all need to focus on affordability. I think he is spot on. But to your point, there are many ways to attack it. I think we need to be much more focused as a city to do just that.
You make a powerful case for why New York will be just fine in terms of the economy overall. But do we need in New York City to be more concerned with competing with other centers around the country, around the world, but particularly around the country, than we have been in the past? We've heard a lot of talk about moving to Dallas, about moving to Miami. Is that a real issue for New York City?
Is it a real issue? Absolutely. Have we risen to the challenge? You bet. New York is stronger today than it was 4 years ago. We have more people coming in than not. We have the second biggest tech hub in New York City. We have more drugs and healthcare coming out of here than any other city but for Boston. We're doing fine.
Where is the Democratic Party right now, and what do you see as its forward path?
Great question. I think the Democratic Party is a work in progress, and the next test will obviously be in a few quarters, November 26. What I can tell you is, as a party, Democrats ought to have the base case that the economy will have a tailwind, ought to have its base case, therefore it has to be much more about what the party's for, not what for the other guys for. And when I think about that, the party has to do a much better job diagnosing what the issues are, coming up with solutions that meet the needs of all Americans. I don't think we've done a very good job. Focusing on affordability in a very practical way, understanding that policy should be driven from people up, not from thinkers down, and has to clearly be much more unified about how that's going to happen. I think that has been an issue for us. I do find parties in general are pretty nimble about course correcting, whether you're Republican or Democrat. I assume by the time midterms come around, Democrats will have figured out how to course correct, but it better be not just an agenda based on fairness, as opposed to fairness and growth.
Who will help guide the Democratic Party away from a very obvious alternative, which is to go to the other extreme? I mean, some people think we're seeing that right now with, you could name names, AOC or Bernie Sanders or even Mamdani. There's a natural reaction to say, okay, we got to compensate. If we've got right-wing populism over here, let's go left-wing populism. How will the Democratic Party avoid that if, in fact, it should?
So I'm quite confident that the Democratic Party has enough voices across the spectrum that by the time we get to the election, we will have a strong group of candidates, will reflect the thinking of most Americans, which is less about political ends of the spectrum, more about just getting tomorrow food on the table, getting a good job, raising your family the right way. And I believe that the party always should focus on all ends of the spectrum, but I do believe it'll end up unifying on what matters most, solving people's issues.
Next, we turn from the C-suites of some of America's largest companies to one specific modest-sized company that depends on imports and exports for its textile business. We go to Bend, Oregon, and hear from Jeff Bowman, CEO of Kokona Labs. This is a story about friendly fire. President Trump has embraced tariffs as a way to protect domestic U.S. businesses from unfair foreign competition.
I might go up with that tariff in the not too distant future. The higher you go, the more likely it is they build a plant here.
Last week, we brought you the story of a music accessories company that is finding new ways of getting the supplies it needs and maintaining its export business despite those tariffs. But for some industries, that's easier said than done.
Already it's impacted our business because it's reduced the amount of volume of business that's out there.
Jeff Bowman is the CEO of Kokona Labs, which makes a compound used in fabric.
We have a technology called 37.5 technology. The purpose of it is to remove humidity from the microclimate next to your skin. That helps you stay more comfortable in both warm and cold weather conditions. And it helps you operate at a peak performance. If you're an athlete, you can operate at peak performance longer. And what we do is we mine a mineral in the United States. Essentially, it's a volcanic sand. We convert that into what's called master batch, which is a concentration of that mineral that's then put into the spinning operations for things like nylon and polypropylene and polyester. They make filaments and yarns out of that. Those yarns and filaments are then made into fabrics. Those fabrics are made into clothing or bedding or footwear. And we make money by selling the master batch, which we make in the United States. Primarily, we export that because most yarn spinners are outside of the United States. And then we also license the technology to brands that use it. Sleep Number for bedding, the Men's Warehouse for clothing, Solomon for technical clothing. If they're hunters, they know First Light. So there's well over 100 brands that we license the technology to.
And that's a proprietary process?
It is. It's very difficult to take a water-loving mineral and put it into manufacturing operations that hate water. So we have patents on it and a ton of trade secrets. You know, we're very cognizant of keeping those trade secrets secret.
The United States is the world's second largest exporter of textiles. It used to be first, employing 1.5 million workers, but now it employs only about 470,000, as China has risen to become the #1 producer.
We do have customers in the United States. Generally, the spinners outside the United States are more competitive from a price standpoint, and they've got more capacity, more infrastructure. You know, decades ago, most of that did reside in the United States. It eventually moved outside of the United States. China, at one point in time, decided that it was a strategic industry, so they worked with their business people to develop that infrastructure. And now that's primarily where most of it's done today. India is also a big export country for us as well.
The tariffs being imposed by the Trump administration affect a textile business like Kokona Labs, both in the cost of its raw products and, ironically, in its exports to places like China.
People are not placing orders because they're uncertain in terms of what the ultimate pricing is going to be. I spent this morning, all morning, talking to my team about a business that we're working on right now with one of the largest hotel chains in the United States. They're looking to incorporate our technology in their bedding. And one of the questions that we're getting from our Chinese partners who would be spinning the yarn for that is how should they price the yarn based on the tariffs? And of course, that's a very difficult question for us to answer. We did export some product to China last week. We ate the tariff ourselves of about 16.5%. We actually ate 10% of that. Previously, there was 6.5% tariff in place already. So it's kind of a wait and see right now. But in the short term, it is reducing the amount of business that's out there. And it's reducing the amount of investment that people are willing to make in new products. Specific to us, because we're a small company that exports as opposed to imports, from China and India and those other places, the reciprocal tariffs also impact us. And when Trump first announced, the large tariffs on China, China retaliated with a 145% tariff. That would have been a killer for us. It would have killed our business. We just happened to have a bunch of our product in our Shanghai warehouse at the time. So within 36 hours, we were able to sell that to our customers, move it out of the warehouse, and that bought us a few months tariff-free. We're waiting to see what's going to happen with the tariffs. It impacts our business, in several ways. We're also trying to develop a domestic business in those countries. So this shirt is an example. It's a shirt made in China and it's sold to Chinese customers. And when the price of the yarns increase, then it impacts the price of the finished products and it impacts our business.
They charge us, we charge them.
In pursuing his approach to tariffs, President Trump has said again and again, one of his main goals is to bring manufacturing back on shore in the United States. Would that work out that way in your business?
No, definitely not. You'd have to cut and sew this garment or bedding or any other garment. You'd have to make that garment in the United States. And people just don't want those jobs, number one. And number two, the cost of labor here is so much higher that the price of those goods would dramatically increase if they're made in the United States. So it would make everything much more expensive. Even the deal with Vietnam is a case in point. I don't think most people understand that those goods coming into the United States already had a tariff on them. In the case of clothing coming from Vietnam as an example, there was a 16.5% tariff before Trump. With the additional 20% that was just negotiated, that means that there's a 36.5% tariff on apparel now coming into the United States from Vietnam. Some of that's going to get passed on, there's no question about it. So the price of goods will go up. With the increase in the price of goods, the amount of business will go down. I mean, Trump and I both went to the same business school, Wharton, and apparently he didn't take the tariff class because certainly the teachings and the empirical history shows that when you impose tariff, the net effect is that you reduce the amount of business that takes place. And we're seeing that happen already. Costs go up, consumers pay the price eventually, and there's just less business being conducted.
Whatever proves out from President Trump's tariffs, at this point it appears there are going to be tariffs. I mean, we already see 15% effective, and in some places it could be higher than that. So assuming that happens, let's assume for a moment it's 15 to 20% effective tariff. What do you do to change your business to make sure it's still a good business, it's viable?
Well, what we have been doing is, number one, making sure that our customers have options. So we ship master batch around the world. We ship it to Turkey, we ship it to India, Taiwan, China, Korea, etc., making sure that they have options so that so we can mitigate the tariffs, hopefully, in any one country. That's the first thing that we're doing. And second is, we're looking at, in some cases, potentially moving some of our manufacturing out of the United States into China, something that we're loath to do, just to reduce the reciprocal tariffs that are being placed on our goods. Ultimately it will help with the cost of goods coming back to the United States. It'll certainly help even more with the goods that are being sold into those countries. We're worried about tariffs. I mean, candidly, we shipped a master batch to China 2 weeks ago. We paid 16.5% tariff on it. We ate 10% of that. That's not sustainable for us long term. We'd have to raise our prices. When we raise our prices, it will ultimately affect the amount of volume that's being sold. So it's not good.
How elastic or inelastic is that demand for your product? I mean, what pricing power do you have to pass along some or all of those increases?
We have to pass on some, otherwise we'll go out of business. And there's that trade-off, and that's in fact what I was talking about this morning. Our Chinese partners are trying to figure out how to price their yarn for this very large hotel chain opportunity. And they want to know how to account for the tariffs. And we don't have an answer for them, candidly, other than to tell them that we're not going to eat that tariff. We may eat a portion of it. I think we're waiting to see what ultimately happens and what the tariffs actually end up being. And then we'll adjust accordingly as best we can. There will be collaboration, I'm sure, throughout the supply chain. Ultimately, you'll see higher prices at the consumer level.
And if, in fact, these tariffs continue, what's going to happen to your employment situation?
In general, we don't lay anybody off. We were actually voted one of the top 50 small companies in the United States to work for last year. So, we value our employees greatly and try to hold on to them, definitely. During COVID, everybody took a pay cut for a period of time, just so that we could survive. So we'll do what we have to do to survive. We'll do what we have to do to hold on to our employees. Ideally, we'll do what we have to do to continue manufacturing in the United States. We're very adaptable.
As difficult as the tariffs may be for Kokona Labs business, Bowman does believe they deserve to have a role in economic policy, just not quite as broad a role as they are being given. If you got to sit down with your fellow Wharton graduate in the White House and give him a piece of your mind about what he should be doing, what would you advise him?
Well, I think tariffs are a strategic tool. I think if they're used surgically, they can help. I think broad brush tariffs don't work, in my opinion, so I would encourage him to be surgical about it. We're a small American company trying to do business in China, where historically there's been very little tariff. of our goods going into China. It's still very difficult to do business in China because of the non-tariff barriers to doing business. Things like the banking laws and the marketing laws and the administrative issues that you have to deal with on a daily basis. And it's not clear to me that this tariff war that we're in is going to impact any of that. All I see happening is that we're going to increase the price of goods coming into the United States. We're not going to address the fundamental issues that are making it difficult for companies like mine to do business in places like China. And that's those non-tariff barriers to doing business.
Whether it's to break down barriers to U.S. exports or to discourage production abroad, one of President Trump's main goals is increasing U.S. manufacturing overall, something special contributor Larry Summers of Harvard says tariffs will not accomplish.
This isn't a debate about whether manufacturing is important or not. That's an important debate to have as we go forward. But even if you take as given the central importance of cutting-edge manufacturing, taxing inputs, alienating partners, and enraging those who control the external markets can't possibly be the right strategy for rebuilding American manufacturers. Look, take another way of looking at this. We think of automobiles as like a traditional industry that we're trying to protect in a good way. But this is slashing General Motors' profits. This is all the automobile companies are complaining about our tariff policies because what they mean for integrated production in North America. So even for the people who were the traditional constituency for this kind of policy, they're not seeing it as a positive. So this is not some debate between the coastal people who like finance and movies as businesses and the people in the middle of the country who are focused on the heartland of manufacturing. Even if you just look at what you're doing for the heartland of manufacturing, higher priced inputs, much more uncertainty for investors, and alienating of customers can't be the right strategy. There's a winner here. There really is a winner here in the strategy that we are pursuing. His name is Xi Jinping, and I hope we'll stop.
Up next, data centers may be the path to an AI future, but what if a community isn't sure they want more data centers? We go to Warrenton, Virginia to find out. This is a story about needs and wants. Sometimes what we need may not be what we want. We need more productivity from AI, but we don't want young college graduates going unemployed. And at least some of us may not want our local communities transformed by the building of all those data centers we need for AI.
Warrenton is a tiny town, 10,000 people. Picture Norman Rockwell picture Mayberry and Andy Griffith.
Cindy Burbank lives in Warrenton, Virginia. She took us to what would have been a data center.
Down this weeded pathway is the 42-acre site that Amazon purchased to build a data center on.
Without data centers to process, store, and distribute information, we don't have AI. With everything from internet search,
we are on an exponential curve, and a relatively steep one,
to drug discovery and approval.
It's going to propel the biological research, AI, in unprecedented ways.
To reap all the benefits AI has to offer, global data center capacity is expected to grow at a rate of 15% per year, and even that may not be enough to keep up with demand. Christine Wood is the data center practice lead at Burns & McDonnell. and consults with companies building data centers.
Power is becoming the long pole in the tent to be able to find a data center site. And so it really starts with that, is the power puzzle that we're seeing associated with the data center sites.
But supplying all that power can cause disruption to the communities where data centers want to be located. Not everyone wants a data center for a neighbor.
We're situated about 45 miles to the west of Washington, D.C.
Carter Neville is a native of Warrenton, Virginia. He has been the mayor of the town since 2019.
We are heavily dependent upon our meals taxes, and our largest meals tax provider is Chick-fil-A. We are very fortunate to have, as residents, very low taxes in terms of real estate taxes. And so pretty much our largest employer is the school board, followed by the hospital and Walmart.
Warrenton's data center journey began in 2023 when the town council voted to consider an Amazon data center on a 42-acre site.
On the upside, to provide a significant amount of revenue, which we are desperately in need of. Our infrastructure is aging. We're behind the eight ball in a lot of our improvements needed to our water treatment and wastewater treatments, especially. We have parts going back that can't even be produced anymore. Parts dating back to the 1950s, and we're in desperate need of upgrading that facility for the safety of our community.
But even the economic benefit couldn't outweigh the town's concerns.
Our frustration was the fact that we were being kept in the dark. Then finally, a year and a half later, we learn about it because Dominion is proposing these massive transmission lines. And that is what was like throwing a match onto a powder keg. The citizens exploded. And first against the transmission lines in Dominion, and then they learned it was tied to the data center. Then we learned from our neighboring jurisdictions what data centers were and the impacts they had. A lot of noise, huge energy generation, monster size to dominate your landscape, and bringing transmission lines and other problems. We did a Freedom of Information Act for the town records. How many people spoke up or wrote in support of the Amazon data center? How many opposed it? And the result was, I'll show you this number, 2,389 of our citizens, our residents, took the time to oppose the data center. They came to the town council meetings, they wrote emails to the town council and so forth. Only 11 people here wanted that data center to happen. And yet we were ignored because Amazon had cut a deal with our elected officials before we even knew about it.
As the opposition grew, it got very, very heated. It got very, very emotional. I think that there was a lot of information that was selectively put out to the community. And so by the time it came to a vote, it was a very divided community. And I'm grateful for the council members that had the courage to do what they believed was right.
Last month, Warrenton's city council voted unanimously on a zoning change that effectively bans data centers altogether. Among the citizens' concerns is the amount of power a data center needs, which would eat up their own access.
Yeah, I think the biggest concern, and the one that the industry itself really needs to address, is the energy usage. That is just huge. And that is something, as I've pointed out to many people, the data centers are coming. Whether one community says yes or no does not ultimately impact the demand on energy. The industry and the energy producers have got to figure that out. They've got to find a better way of providing that energy without hitting the ratepayers like you and me.
15 years ago, a 12 megawatt data center was a huge data center. Now with AI, what we're seeing on the development side is more than a gigawatt on the campus. And to put that in real terms for you, I'm sitting in Dallas. Dallas takes about 3 gigawatts to 5 gigawatts, depending on the time of year, to power the entire city.
One alternative to drawing the needed power from the grid is small modular nuclear reactors, but even they may not be enough to keep up.
When it comes to AI data centers, they are an order of magnitude more power hungry than the data centers we are used to since the internet age.
K.R. Sridhar is the founder and CEO of Bloom Energy, which just signed a deal to provide power to Oracle for its infrastructure data centers. In the United States, is there an overall approach to addressing that enormous demand for power?
Today, it is a scramble for that AI data centers. Collectively, they're investing more than $600 billion just this year. That's the publicly uttered commitments. That's mind-boggling, right? Almost $2 billion a day to feed this beast.
Sridhar's Bloom Energy was created to do just that, provide clean energy on site, eliminating the need for transmission lines and traditional power generators.
The world is completely digital dependent. Not having power, even for a millisecond, is not an option because critical life functions depend on it, like a surgery happening in a hospital, for example. So we said power needs to be extremely reliable. You cannot get that redundant reliability at very high nines unless you have on-site power. If you're going to have on-site power, because you're going to be breathing that air when you're sitting in your office or when you're in your bedroom, by definition, it needs to be clean. And it needs to be very efficient, and it needs to be quiet. So this is the principle on which we founded Bloom Energy.
For the citizens of Warrenton, Virginia, finding that optimal solution of providing data center power in ways the community can tolerate has been elusive. But that has real fiscal consequences for the town.
We are so revenue strapped, but we're facing about $91 million of investment in our wastewater and water treatment plants. And so, that money is just going to have to come out of debt unless we find revenue streams. Our streets are cracked. We have things that are falling apart, and we're just kind of trying to keep the lights on.
Amazon declined to comment on the status of the Warrenton data center. For now, the fate of the project will have to be decided by the courts.
There's a March hearing date on that. There's a citizen group that challenged it in court. And so we are waiting to see what that decision is in March. And I believe that Amazon has probably moved on. But I do expect that, if they remain, if the courts favor the town and Amazon, that they will eventually build there. But as of now, I'm not sure where it stands.
The transformative power of AI means that we need to have it. And that means we need to have data centers, even with their enormous power demands. The question now is where they will go, and whether we can find ways to make them the good neighbors that people in towns like Warrenton, Virginia, will welcome. That does it for us here at Wall Street Week. I'm David Westin. See you next week for more stories of capitalism.